Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is the second and final commentary I'm doing on the 21st century version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe on the episode Snake Pit. This is actually the third episode of this particular incarnation of the series that I ever saw. As I've mentioned before, I picked it up on ITV to see what it was like with Orko's Garden, which was then followed the next week by Buzz-Off's Pride. And coming into this third episode that I'd ever seen, I thought, well, I hope we get to see Skeletor this time, because that's something that's really been missing from the two episodes I've seen so far, and actually, as it turns out, Orko's Garden is the first episode at all without Skeletor, and Buzz-Off's Pride is the second. So, in terms of Skeletor seeing, that wasn't a very good place to pick up the series, although, as I've mentioned before, I did rather like Orko's Garden, with the pitting against each other of Mossman and Evil Seed. But I had high hopes coming into this episode, particularly with this opening scene, because very obviously, who is this escaping from prison? It's Cobra Khan, who I knew as a member of Skeletor's gang, and I suppose he is a member of Skeletor's gang for about 5 minutes here. But I knew he was in the old series as one of Skeletor's gang, and I'd had the action figure for a long time, where you take the head off and fill the cavity with water, and then you can make it spit water, representing venom, which is something that Cobra Khan is very famous for. So I was thinking, during all this bit, excellent, Cobra Khan is escaping, he's going to go off and join Skeletor's gang, and that will be Skeletor and the rest of the gang in the show. And indeed, that is what happens. However, what I didn't realise is that actually this episode kicks off a whole new direction for the show, which we don't go into immediately. There's more build-up to the main Snake Men stuff. But this is where it all begins, the new direction for the show. And it contains a few cameos from characters we're going to meet and are important in the near future. There's the first one from Stinkor, or as he is there, Odifus, in his unmutated form, in the dungeon. And we'll see a couple more characters briefly who are going to become important in times to come as we go. Hopefully I'll remember to point them out. But yeah, here we go. I was getting excited here. Cobra Khan on his way to Snake Mountain. Too Bad and Merman accost him. I think, oh, excellent, we're going to see Skeletor soon. But I didn't realise it was going to lead on to all this Snake Men stuff. Now, the Snake Men were an idea that came rather late in the original toy line and weren't really able to be incorporated into the original show very well. Obviously, Cobra Khan, the Snake Man that Mattel first thought of, was there in the original series, Season 2, one of Skeletor's new gang members, along with Webstor and Whiplash. But the other Snake Men didn't really find a place in the original series. The only other two Snake Men who were in the original series were Tongue Lasher and Ratclaw, and really they appeared in the She-Ra series as members of the Horde, and didn't really seem to be known as Snake Men, and indeed Cobra Khan wasn't really called a Snake Man in the old show. He was a Repton, which are a race of Snake Men, but not exactly the thing that the toy line was trying to kick off. And yeah, normally Tongue Lasher and Rattlor were part of the Horde, but also during the course of the She-Ra series, they were both seen at least once each on Eternia working for Skeletor. So really the old show didn't know what to do with Tongue Lasher and Rattlor and the Snake Men as a concept, and ended up doing nothing with it, and what they did try to do with it became very confusing. This scene where Adam and Man-at-Arms talk about the Snake Men and their history on Eternia, as Orko being a stupid, annoying little bastard thing with his two little snake puppets, this is so easy to do. just not include Orko very well in the episode, have him hanging around being annoying. Even from such a skilled writer as Stephen Melching, who I've praised so much for doing things on The Mummy, the animated series, on those commentaries that I've done. But even Steve can't really handle Orko like a good old original series writer like Larry DiTillio can. Here we get this flashback about Zodak and the Elders and the Snake Men. They'll kind of change this in Season 2 and involve Hordak and the Horde in the original defeat of the Snake Men and sealing them in the void. So they don't know exactly how all the history of Eternia fits together yet, and they kind of go back on this a bit later. But it's interesting and good how they do try to include some of these characters, factions in the history of Eternia that didn't really get included properly in it, like the mini-comics said they were and wanted them to be in the original series. The Snake Men, the Horde, having them in the past, in the build-up to the status quo as we know it, that works pretty well, and I think the Snake Men are pretty interesting and do deserve that opportunity to be properly included as a race, and Cobra Khan properly included as one of them in the whole thing. But I do think it's a mistake when they actually go ahead and take over the show and it becomes Masters of the Universe versus the Snake Men. The Snake Man as main antagonist, King Hiss as the chief antagonist. It's not nearly as good as Skeletor and the gang. And the fact that Skeletor and friends get usurped and fade into the background in the second half of Season 2, that's not a good thing for the show. But having occasional Snake Men stuff going on, like they do occasional Hordak stuff going on, would have been good, I think. Just in the end, as I say, rather gets overdone. But I do like this episode, Cobra Khan and the Snake Man history, and meeting some Snake Men and hearing about how they fit into the whole mythos. That's good stuff. And that brings me on to a point about Cobra Khan and his relationship to the Snake Men. I always kind of thought, after a couple of watch-throughs at this, that they kind of go back on the status that Cobra Khan has as a Snake Man in this episode. I'll just pause in that point briefly to say, here we are on top of the mountain with Zodak, who has been adapted in a more interesting way than in the old series, where he was the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-judgmental cosmic enforcer. In this one, he's a kind of magic ninja guy who lives in the mountains and has beef with the Snake Man and always comes out to fight the Snake Man. And that works rather well too, matching up some characters in the history of the show, and I think that's good use of Zodak. But yeah, Cobra Khan in this one I always thought seemed like a proper, full-fledged Snake Man who was probably there fighting with them in the original battle. And then I thought they kind of went back on that in Season 2, when they started saying Cobra Khan is not a true Snake Man, he's a puny descendant, he has never tasted battle or blood. And I think, well, hasn't he? How come in this episode he knows Zodak and greets him as someone he's fought before, and he seems very familiar with and seems to greet like they've met before General Ratlaw when he comes out of the void. It seems in that way that Cobra Khan has full inclusion in all the Snake Man history stuff. But then I noticed just now in this episode Cobra Khan does say, I'm coming to free you ancient ones, implying that he's not one of the ancient ones. And Zodak says to him in a while, prepare to join your snake ancestors. So perhaps they do kind of know that Cobra Khan is a Snake Man descendant and wasn't there with all the battle in the first place. But as I say, he knows Zodak personally. He seems to know General Ratlaw, who is one of the ancient Snake Men. personally. So, does it really make sense with Cobra Khan? No, it doesn't. I don't think they really know themselves at this point. And perhaps they think it doesn't matter. Of course, I'm calling Ratlaw now General Ratlaw, as he is in this series, really building up the character into the general of the Snake Men, second in command to King Hiss. And when I had the She-Ra DVDs and saw Ratlaw in that, I thought, oh, there's General Ratlaw. But of course, he's not General Ratlaw in the old cartoon or the toy line. That's the status he gets in this show, to develop him and big him up. And yeah, that works pretty well. You see Zodak here absolutely creaming all Skeletor's evil warriors, and actually, the person who does best against Zodak in this episode is Cobra Khan. And really, Cobra Khan has the best powers, abilities of all the Snake Men, really, I think. They do this thing in Season 2 where Cobra Khan has a kind of rivalry with the quote-unquote true Snake Men, and they're all saying to him, hey, you're not really one of us, you don't eat people, you're not a proper Snake Man, and he's always trying to go behind their backs and lick up to King Hiss, and King Hiss does appreciate Cobra Khan a lot, actually, in Season 2, finds him in many ways the most useful Snake Man warrior that he has. Yeah, here's something that indicates Cobra Khan's been around for a while, involved in the whole Snake Man thing. He's got this magic sort of belt buckle that unlocks the void. I mean, he's a Snake Man descendant, is he? Okay, but he's heavily involved in the whole thing. To say he's never tasted battle or blood, I don't think that quite fits in with what we're doing here. But yeah, as I say, Cobra Khan's power. Oh, look, here we go. Cameo appearance from Webstore. Silent cameo appearance, but we'll be seeing more of him hanging around underneath Snake Mountain in later episodes, very soon indeed. Yeah, Cobra Khan has the best power of all the Snake Men with his spitting venom. Pretty devastating whenever it's used, and as I say, it does do the best against Zodak of anybody in this episode. And yeah, the other Snake Man's powers aren't really that good. Ratlaw with his extending neck, Squeeze with his massive arms, Tongue Lasher with his massive tongue. They're not that good, really. Cobra Khan's spitting venom that dissolves everything and blinds people is much better. Of course, we don't get in this episode the other named Snake Men apart from Cobra Khan, General Ratlaw, and King Hiss. But then they come out of the void very quickly when it's opened again for Season 2. The other named ones based on their designs from the original toy line. As I say, Squeeze, Tongue Lasher, and Snake Face, who has a pretty good power, which is the Medusa-like power to turn people to stone, and that's why he's so overpowered. They can't really keep him in the series because he just go around turning all the characters to stone all the time. So he quite quickly turns himself to stone accidentally and spends the rest of the series in the Eternian dungeon. So certainly when you take Snakeface out of the equation, Cobra Khan has very much the best Snake Man powers. And here's this fight I was talking about with Zodak and Cobra Khan. Zodak has absolutely creamed Skeletor and friends. He brushed off He-Man, Man-at-Arms and Teela, Adam, Man-at-Arms and Teela. He's not He-Man yet, although he probably should be by this point. He turns into He-Man rather late, unfortunately. And what happens here? Zodak is finally brought down by the spitting venom of Cobra Khan, who then goes on to release all the Snake Men. I mean, he's a very capable, very powerful character in this series, Cobra Khan, and the true Snake Men are very unwise to kind of set up a rivalry with him in the next series, because they're not really up to it. And there we are, Ratlaw, or as he is now, General Ratlaw, comes out of the pit. And this is where Cobra Khan greets him as an old ally, certainly, if not friend. Ratlaw's like, Zodak. And Cobra Khan says, yours to do with as you wish, General Ratlaw. I mean, are we saying he's never met General Ratlaw before? Later on, when we say he's only a descendant? Does he only recognise Ratlaw from pictures? I don't think so. They have a little chat there. Here are my tormentors, says Cobra Khan. I mean, if they didn't know each other, Ratlaw would be like, well, who are you? So I don't think the Cobra Khan history really makes sense and matches up. And really, as far as I'm concerned, he is a true Snake Man, because he has the best Snake Man powers, and he has all the other Snake Man abilities, such as sprouting gills and breathing underwater in Season 2, which doesn't make a great deal of sense anyway, because they're not amphibians, fish, but there we go. And also, Cobra Khan is the one who keeps freeing them, opening the void every time. He's the loyalist Snake Man. So really, whether he's a puny descendant or he's tasted battle before or not, he's the best Snake Man now, hands down, I would say. And finally, Adam turns into He-Man here. It took him far too long. And of course, it's made Teela far too suspicious of why he's run off. You get the Adam and Teela relationship in this one. I've mentioned before how that's a strong love-hate relationship, quite central to the show. But sometimes Teela is a bit overly aggressive with other characters, comes across as unpleasant, strong female woman. I think that does happen at times. Just when she should be saying general, casual things, she comes across as rather aggressive. But there we go. She's used quite well in this episode as one of the main good guys coming and fighting the Snake Man. But then we have to have a pause while He-Man comes into the room for Teela to say, oh, He-Man, how did you know about this? And he has to say, the sorcerers contacted me. I mean, you don't really need that exchange, all these excuses from He-Man. In the old show, Teela would just kind of accept that He-Man always turned up when they needed him, even when they were all in outer space and Adam disappeared to another part of the spaceship and then suddenly He-Man was there on the outside fixing the spaceship. Teela would always accept that. So I think they do a bit too much, oh yes, the sorceress told me, that's why I'm here, I'm not really Adam, in this series. But there we are, here's a bit where they all keep falling into the void, and I did enjoy here, when I first watched the episode, how Skeletor turns up to join the fight. And at the moment he seems to think, or does he really believe it? Is he just kind of toying with Cobra Khan? He's saying, how thoughtful of you, Cobra Khan, releasing an army of snake men to help me take over Eternia. And Cobra Khan's like, yes, of course that's what I'm doing. But does Skeletor really believe that? I don't think he does. I think he's rather threatening Cobra Khan there. I rather suspect that you came here and are planning to betray me, and now I'm here to do something about that, if it be the case. And that's what happens. Skeletor joins in the fray and starts fighting everyone. And that's good. I want to keep him involved in the action here in this episode, as he should have been kept involved in the action of the whole series, and kind of wasn't, with the Masters of the Universe versus the Snake Men stuff. And here is that cameo from King Hiss, down in the void, in silhouette. And you just know we'll be seeing more of him later, but you don't know, and I wouldn't really have guessed that he was going to kind of usurp Skeletor as the main villain of the show. Which, as I say, I think is a mistake. But occasional Snake Man stuff like this episode, I like that, and it could have worked. As I say, it's nice integration of some of the old mini-comic stuff, characters, factions, that didn't make it into the old series. And that, as I've said before, is something that this new series does do rather well at times. newer series, of course, I mean by that. And Zodak's been learning a lesson in this episode. He thinks he can go off and defeat all the Snake Men and Skeletor's warriors alone. Well, here's the bit where Cobra Khan gives himself away to Skeletor. King Hiss will rule. And Skeletor's like, oh yes. And Cobra Khan's like, uh-oh, I burned my bridges with Skeletor. So he wasn't part of Skeletor's gang for very long, was he? But yeah, Zodak initially brushes off help from Man-at-Arms and Adam and Teela. And now he's seemingly learning his lesson. He doesn't have enough power left to close the void by himself. You are not powerful enough, as Cobra Khan puts it. So what happens? He-Man adds his power, and the void is closed. And there's a very clear lesson. Working together, you get things done. And as He-Man tells us in the moral segment, which is an okay moral segment, not taking the piss this time, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, but of strength to know when you need help, and to have good people whose help you can rely on. Like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So that's a good lesson, and as I say, it appears that Zodak learns it here, but whenever Zodak reappears in future, he has to learn it again and again and again. He's still rather arrogant and trying to do things all by himself, which is rather annoying, because once he's learned the lesson, it should stay with him. And of course we notice here that all the Snake Men have been sucked back into the void, except General Rattlor. And of course Cobra Khan hasn't, but then he wouldn't have been sucked back into the void because he's never been in there. So now we have Cobra Khan and General Rattlor going off together, hanging around, and as Khan says there, King Hiss will rise. We'll get him out at some point, and indeed he's right. They will. So that stinks of some intriguing times to come, and indeed they do come, and go a bit too far, as I say. And Zodak very contrite to He-Man here. I was foolish, it was wrong. I did need your help, and we can rely on each other's help in future, says He-Man. Shake hands, smile. But no! He-Man and Zodak end up clashing on that issue again in Season 2, and they have this huge pointless fight. You must accept our help, Zodak. No, I mustn't. I'm going to fight you. That's not very good, all that stuff. So yeah, as an episode, Snake Pit, I think it's really very good. And it could have had interesting repercussions later in the series in a different way than it actually did. I think that would have been slightly better, just to play down the Snake Men stuff a bit, but to include them in the show, like Hordak and the Horde, and to have Zodak as a proper ally, and he remembers the lesson that he's learned here. So there we go, an end to Snake Pit, and an end to my commentaries on He-Man episodes. But hopefully you'll join me again next time for my final He-Man commentary, which is going to be quite an undertaking, because it will be on the movie, the 1987 movie, Masters of the Universe.